Okay, today we have a special online workshop about the Japan's first Korean labors and then the compensation problem of the Korean labors problem under the colonial measures. 오늘은 긴급 온라인 강좌로 조선인 강제노동 보상 문제에 대해서 워크숍을 하게 되는데요. 皆さん、今日は朝鮮人の強制労働問題に関してちょっと緊急ワークショップを行うことになります。しかし、今日はですね、この現地の言語の問題があって、アメリカ・ワシントン DC で行うことで、基本言語は英語を使うことになります。오늘은 워싱턴 DC에서 저희들이 긴급 워크숍을 하는 관계로 오늘은 언어를 영어를 기본으로 사용하겠습니다. Today we have this workshop in the Washington DC, and so sorry we have to use the English, the basic languages. 영어로 녹음을 된 것을 나중에 다시 보내드리도록 하겠습니다. 오늘은 영어를 기본으로 양해해 주시기 바랍니다. 英語で行ったものもまだ録画で送りますが、今日はご理解をお願いしたいと思います。We are recording the English version, and we'll send the English version again to the audience. So sorry. Okay, so sorry to late today. The Korean and the Japanese civilian peoples, now we are the conference in Washington, D.C., and the campaign for peace. Let me just explain about the hours that we call workshops meaning. You know that this year is the 80th anniversary of at the end of the Second World War, and this year is also the 60th anniversary of the normalization between Korea and Japan. And then 2025, if we think that the relations between two countries, there are so many historical problems or political problems, but even though there are so many problems between two countries, after 6 years, the two countries accomplished so many drastic changes. For example, 11 million people visited each other, and we have so many K-pop and K-cultures affected each other. But we have to admit that between two countries, we couldn't finish or solve the historical and the colonial problem. And then we are now projecting the kind of the Americans, scholars, and the civilian people together in Washington, D.C. And then we also now, the historical problem is a kind of historical problem, post-labor problem is a very sensitive and very important problem. Then today, this whole workshop is offered by Korea's 민족문제연구소 and the Korea's 태평양 피해자 보상 추진협의회, and in Japan, 교세도인 문제 가이케주도 각호 세산노 다메노 교도, and in Japan, 일본 세대주 모토 조요코 사이방어 시엔스루 카이. And in America also Asia Police Point, and maybe you later the Mindy Cutler, the representative of this the group, where she maybe explain about the Asia Police Pointers. And today so we have the schedule. First the Korea side and explain the what is the Korea's post-labor problem. And then that is the situation now. And the second, maybe the Asia police point. Also they explained the POW problem in America. And then as a third, the Professor Seo, he will explain the background of the San Francisco Peace Street. And the last, the Ujimi Aiko, she also explained the POW and the Korean criminal wars problem and together. And then, so we have no time, so we begin. And first, the Korea's 민족문제연구소 at 김민철 explained the situation of Korea's labor problem. Okay, please give a hand to 김민철.
반갑습니다. 네, 한국민족문제연구소 연구위원 김민철입니다.
Hello, my name is Kim Min-chul from 민족문제연구소 of South Korea.
주신 민디 코틀러스에게 감사 인사를 드리고 싶습니다.
Thank you, Mindy Cutler, for this opportunity. And we welcome the workshop in Washington, D.C. on the issue of forced labor in Japan.
네, 일본제철은 2차 세계대전 당시에 약 만여 명의 조선인을 야하다, 가마이시, 오사카 제철소 등의 강제동원해서 강제노동을 시켰습니다.
During World War II, Nippon Steel forcibly mobilized 10,000 Koreans to work at Yahata, Kamahashi, Osaka steel work sites.
이 강제 동원된 조선인들은 대개 배고픔에 시달렸고 임금도 제대로 받지 못했으며 실제 이 강제 노동을 통해서 인권을 침해당하는 그런 상황에 처해졌습니다.
The Koreans were hungry, they haven't received their wages, and their humanity was violated.
그래서 1997년부터 일본과 그리고 이후에 한국에서 피해 배상을 촉구하는 소송을 벌였습니다.
So since 1997, there has been lawsuit filed against victims in Japan and Korea.
마침내 2018년에 대한민국 대법원은 일본제철이 피해자에게 피해 배상을 하라라고 일본제철에게 그런 배상 판결을 선고했습니다.
In 2018, the Supreme Court of Korea have ruled that Japan still needs to compensate the victims.
이후에 또 2023년에도 다시 추가로 강제동원 피해자 유족이 소송을 해서 최종 승소 판결을 받았습니다.
And in 2023, the family members of the original victims also filed a lawsuit and they won.
그러나 아베 정부가 이 판결에 개입을 해서 일본 제철이 피해 배상을 하지 않도록 일본 정부가 나서서 방해를 했습니다.
But Abe administration, he intervened with the ruling and Nippon Steel did not proceed with the compensation.
그리고 그런 배상 판결이 지금까지 이행되고 있지 않는 상태입니다.
And it has not been executed since.
일본제철은 글로벌 기업으로서 경영철 홈페이지에 경영 철학에 이렇게 밝히고 있습니다. 일본제철은 인권 경영을 한다. 그래서 각국의 법률을 존중하고 인권 경영을 실현하는 글로벌 기업이라고 선전하고 있습니다.
In their website of Nippon Steel, which is a global company, it states that their management philosophy is to respect human rights and the law.
그렇지만 그런 경영 철학을 일본제철은 아직까지 이행하고 있지 않습니다.
But they have not implemented their philosophy.
그리고 이 일본제철에는 조선인뿐만 아니라 중국인 강제노동도 있었고 또 오늘 이야기되는 연합군 포로 POW의 강제노동도 같이 포함되어 있습니다.
And also there were other workers such as Chinese workers who are in the forced labor and also POWs.
지난 2015년에 아베 정부가 일본의 근대 산업 시설을 세계유산으로 등재를 했을 때 세계유산위원회는 일본제철의 산업시설을 세계유산으로 등재를 하면서 다음과 같은 권고를 했습니다.
In 2015, Abe was trying to put this site as a World Heritage, trying to register it under the World Heritage, but the committee have some recommendations about this site.
세계유산위원회는 등재를 허락하면서 강제노동 어두운 역사, 즉 전체 역사를 이 산업시설이 기억하고 그리고 피해를 입었던 피해자들을 추모하는 시설을 세우도록 그렇게 권고를 했습니다.
The Heritage Committee granted permission, but they also recommended that the site must remember and teach the dark history, the entire history, and commemorate the victims.
그리고 그 자리에서 유네스코 일본 대사는 그 권고 사항을 충실히 이행하겠다고 세계유산위원회 위원들에게 약속을 했습니다.
And also the UNESCO ambassador did promise that they would implement these recommendations.
그러나 10년이 지난 지금까지도 아직까지 이 일본 정부는 이 약속을 이행하고 있지 않습니다.
But even after 10 years, Japan still has not kept their promise.
그리고 기업 차원에서 일본제철 기업 차원에서도 그런 피해자들의 어두운 역사를 기록하고 추모하는 노력들을 하고 있지 않다고 생각하고 있습니다.
And also, as a company, they still have not implemented the remembrance and commemoration of the victims.
그래서 오늘 같은 이런 한미일 공동 워크숍을 통해서 일본제철이 글로벌 기업으로서 또 인권을 추구하는 그런 기업이라고 스스로 선언했기 때문에 그 정신을 즉각 이행할 수 있도록 촉구하고 싶습니다.
So in such workshops as today, we would like to declare that as a global company, they should fulfill the spirit of their corporation and their philosophy.
그리고 이 자료는 일본의 근대 산업시설에 동원되었던 강제 동원되었던 조선인, 그다음에 중국인, 그리고 이제 일본인 내부에서도 이제 포로노동 같은 또 연합군 포로노동이나 그런 어두운 역사들을 전체 정리를 해서 영어로 해서 세계유사위원회에 발송을 하고, 그리고 최근에는 일본 이제 사도강산에서 벌어졌던 강제노동의 역사도 정리를 해서 그렇게 지금 알리고 있습니다. 이 워크숍을 통해서 이런 부분들이 조금 더 널리 알려지길 바랍니다.
So the material that I'm showing you is a document of the dark history of Koreans, Chinese, and even some Japanese prisoners who were forced into the labor. And also this was submitted to the World Heritage Committee, and it even deals about the Sado mine
네.
in the book.
예, 이상 간단하게 제 이야기 마치도록 하겠습니다.
That's all for my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Kim Mitchell. Maybe let's give a hand to him. Okay. Then we have a next presentation about the POW problem of USA, and I will introduce the Mindy Kotler, right? Maybe it's the first time that also we have the first time today, right?
Minutes?
No, it's 10 minutes. Okay, right. Yeah, then you.
I was introduced. My name is Mindy Cutler. I'm with this think tank here in Washington called Asia Policy Point, and we study Japan and Northeast Asia, the U.S. policy relationship. The only Washington that looks at the larger relationship in terms. We include history as an important part of it and understand Japanese war history for contemporary problems. Back when in the 80s, I went to meet the grandmother of my husband before we got married, and she was very much a New England matriarch, direct descendant of the first rector of Yale University, and one time owned a farm on Manhattan. And one of the first things she said to me after she looked me over was, "Oh, you studied Japan. Well, they killed my brother." I said, I'm sorry. And it turns out that he was a prisoner of war and died in the Philippines in a prisoner of war camp. He actually died in a prison, but that's neither here nor there. And I made a promise to her that if it ever came to pass that I could do something to rectify this so he would be remembered, I would. And so since about 2008, which started with, I had an op-ed in the New York Times talking about the problem of the American POWs with Japan. And Japan is become increasingly unrepentant regarding its war crimes, or even talking about the war with any kind of understanding. And the Nippon Steel issue really brings everything to a head. When you go to meetings talking about Nippon Steel, you hear that this is a people employed, and it seems to be devoid of any of the history of Nippon Steel as a poor manager of labor, as an enslaver of other people in Asia. and particularly American POWs. The state of Pennsylvania, where Nippon Steel is going to be located, at least for now, is one of the largest states for veterans. So it has a very large veterans community. And many of the POWs that died in Nippon Steel mills, because it was not just a mill, there were also coal mines, there were also docks, there were also rail yards, there were all sorts of facilities. And regarding Nippon Steel, from my count, and that's difficult to count because I was only using the liberation records, there were 6,000 American and Allied prisoners of war that worked for Nippon Steel. And I included in there Sumitomo Steel because that eventually became part of Nippon Steel. And anyone who tells you that today's Nippon Steel is not the 1930s Nippon Steel doesn't know much about Japanese corporate history or just simply lying to you. Recently, Nippon Steel scrubbed its website, but you can still find from other corporate histories, there is a direct line from the original Imperial Steelworks that became Nippon Steel. And so of the 6,000, there were at least 2,000. There was a death rate of about 10%. And if statistics continue, there usually was a death rate of 10% when people returned in the first year. Then you didn't have suicide, you had accidents, or you just had, they would drink themselves to death. Many men got lobotomized. It was a very big tragedy. So Nippon Steel is trying to be a good citizen and a good corporate responsible member of its community. It believes it does have its civic duty, but that should go beyond getting involved in the sports teams or getting involved in the food banks or trying to give decent health care to its workers, because many of its workers are descendants of prisoners of war. Americans aren't very good with history, and so sometimes this history gets lost. And the American POWs are in a quite different situation than the Korean forced laborers because the Americans were slave laborers. They were not acquired, they were not kidnapped, they were not requisitioned. They were prisoners of war. Their well-being was in the hands of the Japanese government. Their welfare was dependent on the decisions made by the Japanese government. So they were a level beyond forced labor. And they are also not considered human, although when the decisions were made in the early 1942, what to do with the prisoners of war, they were considered more skilled than the Asian, either the Chinese POWs or the requisitioned labor. So they felt that they could be useful. But that doesn't mean that they were fed. That doesn't mean they were given medical care. That doesn't mean they were given any single level of respect. It was brutal. And as an example of the brutality, the death rate for American POWs of the Japanese was 40%, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on the camp. And if you looked at the German Nazi prisoner of war camps, the Stalags, the death rate was 1.5%. And also with the Germans, it was very rare for an American POW to do slave labor for a private company. It almost always was the case for the Americans if they survived and made it to Japan or China. Many Americans died in transit on hell ships. So you have a strange combination of government responsibility and then the companies that requested POWs. The companies were requested, like Mr. Hayashi, who is wanting to run for prime minister. He is the great-great-grandson of the founder of Ube Industries. And I think if you went into the archives, you would find his great-great-grandfather's signature requisitioning POWs. There are quite a number of POWs that worked in the Ube Industries coal mines. And Mr. Hayashi is fully aware of this issue because I personally told him. So that's not Nippon Steel, but and with Nippon Steel, almost every American has seen the movie or read the book called Unbroken. It seems like that's a history that they didn't connect to anything or anyone. It's about the Olympian Louis Zamperini, who became a naval aviator and who crashed into the ocean and eventually drifted ashore to be captured by the Japanese and put in a number of prisoner of war camps. And his story is told in this best-selling book and movie, and there are scenes of him being tortured in a Nippon Steel plant that still exists. And the American Congress and the American judicial system and the White House has consistently fought the Americans in their lawsuits. So there is no possibility of compensation. There's no possibility of direct government enforced redress. However, there's nothing keeping Nippon Steel from having a sense of shame for having employed so many prisoners of war and having starved them, having beaten them, having tortured them, having them die in their camps. One of the most famous comedy duos in the late 60s and early 70s was a group of two young men called the Smothers Brothers. They were considered very anti-war. Why were they anti-war? Because their father, Major Smothers, who fought nobly and boldly on the Philippines, ended up in a Nippon Steel mill. And because of the lack of medical care there, he died on the dock to Moji where they were going to ship him to Korea. So we want to know, the American POWs want recognition, acknowledgement, an apology. This is something money can't buy. It is a tradition in Asia to give an atonement payment, but for the Americans, acknowledgement is everything. And as you mentioned regarding the UNESCO World Heritage Sites, I actually identified 2 UNESCO World Heritage Sites that are still working steel mills for Nippon Steel, which do not recognize the prisoners of war, whether they're American or Allied. And in fact, when I personally wrote to various embassies saying to Norway, to Jamaica, to Argentina, to a number of countries, did you know that your people were prisoners of war in a Nippon Steel mill and that they are violating the rules that UNESCO has put out? But I'm just one person. And so you have Louis Zamperini, you have Major Smothers, and I'll end with there are many important Americans who survived and didn't survive the coal mines, the mills, the transport centers. And one of them who survived for a while was Governor Newsom's grandfather. Governor Newsom's grandfather survived a steel mill, a hell ship, and he eventually came back to California, became a well-known horticulturalist. But finally, after 20 years, the PTSD, the flashbacks were too much. And he committed suicide in his home. And it's very likely that the governor, as a young child, was in the house when that happened. So these war crimes, these indignities are not for one generation. And research has shown that trauma is multi-generational. It embeds in the genes. And so it's not merely a question of civic responsibility, but it's responsibility to many generations to ease this pain and this doubt. And Nippon Steel wants to be trusted. It's time they do the right thing to be trusted. It is not asking a lot.
Okay, thank you, the medical tour. Maybe some people it's the first time to listening to start to continue know to the relationship POW and the Korean post labor problem. then maybe in Japan and Korea, usually the Korean forced labor problem is announced in the news, and then some civilian group suggested that problem. But POW is somebody is as a media controller, they campaigned and announced the problem, but in Korea and Japan, it's very rare to know about it as a background. And today, maybe we also little time, but we have a chance to listen to about the background of them. Later, if we have a time, we have the question and the answer time. Please question the later another times. Okay, the third presenter is the Zelle. He will a little bit explain about the background of the San Francisco Peace Treaty. Why the POW and then Korean labor posed the problem with connected each other. It's the beginning of the San Francisco Peace Treaty. And yeah, let's give a hand to Zelle.
Well, thank you for joining us today in a very difficult but important discussion on what to do about the POW and the forced laborers who suffered war and colonization more than 80 years ago. Mindy put the big issue in the context of personal issues, personal experiences, and I'd like to put the issue in a more historical context. And the issue is complicated in that it involves not only Japanese corporation, Nippon Steel, and American company, U.S. Steel, but also Japanese government and American government. And after the war, after the end of Japan's colonial rule, the U.S. government and the Japanese government made a very conscious decision to exclude colonial issues and exclude reparation issues of Korean victims from the post-war settlement. And that exclusion continues to today. And that is one of the core reasons why the Korean forced laborers and the American POWs are still suffering from lack of attention and reparation. Now, I have a lot of things to discuss, but let me just focus on the issues of reparation. San Francisco Peace Treaty was signed in 1951 and went into effect in 1952. That settled the war between the U.S. And allies on the one side, and Japan and on the other side. And one of the issues during the San Francisco Peace Conference was what to do about reparations, whether Japan was responsible for paying reparations, and if so, how much, and whether the Allied powers would demand reparations, and if so, how much. And the compromise was made already in 1949, even before the peace conference was held in 1951. And that compromise between Japanese and the U.S. government was that Japan would no longer pay reparations after 1949, so that Japan's economy could be revived and serve as a base for anti-communism in Asia as an American ally. And that compromise became formalized in the San Francisco Peace Treaty in Article 14. Section A of that article explicitly states Japan should pay reparations to the Allied powers for the damage and suffering caused by it during the war. And this is problematic in that the Allied powers was narrowly and specifically defined to be those states that signed the declaration by United Nations in 1951. And that meant that even though the provisional government of Korea made a declaration against the Empire of Japan, Korea was not recognized as one of the Allied powers. One of the important reasons why Korea was excluded from the Allied powers and why the provisional government's declaration of war was not recognized as a declaration of war has to do with the fact that the UK and the US were colluding with the Empire of Japan to colonize the Korean peninsula. And so the Treaty of Anglo-Japanese Alliance of 1902 and 1905 made a deal between the two, recognized Japan's interest in Korea in return for Japan's recognition of UK's interest in China. And the US and Japan made a similar trade in 1905 in the form of Taft-Gatsura Agreement. And these deals were recognized after the war. And in 1951, Prime Minister Yoshida made an argument to Dulles that the annexation of Korea was legally conducted in accordance with the annexation treaty between Japan and Korean government, and there was no war relationship between Japan and Korea. And therefore, Korea has neither the status of an allied nation nor the right to demand war reparations from Japan. The UK representative for the peace conference also made a similar argument, and UK opposed the inclusion of Korea because, quote, the acceptance of Korea's signing of the peace treaty with Japan leads to the denial of the legality of Japan's colonial rule and sparks the debate that denies Western colonial rule itself. And these arguments were accepted by the Department of State in June of 1951. And the department accepted that the US and other major powers deliberately refrained from recognizing the provisional government of Korea as having any status whatsoever during World War II. The fact that the Korean government declared war on Japan and that Korean elements, mostly residents in China, fought with the Chinese forces do not, therefore, have any bearing on the question. On this basis, the San Francisco Peace Treaty was made in a way to define the Allied powers to exclude Korea, and that, in a way, led to the following article in the San Francisco Peace Treaty. So, Article 21, moving on to the second part of the slide, states that Korea shall be entitled to the benefits of Articles 2, 4, 9, and 12 of the present treaty. And these articles refer to disposition of property claims, fishing, and trading, and pointedly left out Article 14 on reparations. So even though Article 14 on reparations limit the right to receive reparations only to the Allied powers, Article 21 made sure that Korea would not even enjoy Article 14. And this became the basis for the normalization treaty between Japan and Korea in 1965, and set the stage where Korean victims of colonial rule would not be able to make a demand for reparations. So when comfort women and forced laborers started to speak up about their experiences and demanded reparations as an apology, they were breaking the silence on the colonial past made in San Francisco in 1951, and they were breaking the silence that has been maintained since then. And so to listen to them is to open the possibility of authentic communication about the colonial past and post-colonial future. Also, it brings to the fore the fact that the San Francisco Peace Treaty violated Potsdam's declaration's promise of just reparation for the enslavement of the people of Korea recognized in Cairo Declaration. So San Francisco Peace Treaty violated promises and commitments made by Allied powers to pay just reparations for the sufferings of the Korean people. More importantly, it contravenes the Slavery Convention of 1926 that prevents slave trade and commits to eliminate slavery. And that also, the convention also promulgates severe penalties for slave trading, slave holding, and enslavement. Given that Cairo Declaration recognized Japan's colonization as the enslavement of the people of Korea, the Slavery Convention should have applied to Japan, and it should have imposed the penalties for slave trading and enslavement, and it should have held Japan for violating the convention. And so it's time that Americans, Japanese, and Koreans collaborate to break the silence and start authentic communication about the colonial past and post-colonial future. And so, in an ironic way, Nippon Steel's acquisition of U.S. Steel opens an opportunity that the three nations can collaborate to finally deal with the issues of reparations and justice that have not been adequately addressed for the past 80 years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Jung. And if you have a question, and maybe later we have a time, and then just we have the 1 hour at the beginning section, and then we have last presenter at the Ujimi Aiko, is the Japan Peace Association at the present, and then now she's in Washington, and then she will present about the Korean BC criminal problem. And then, please give a hand for,
私に与えられたテーマは、朝鮮人強制労働保障問題と連合国捕虜問題という、こういうテーマでした。
Today's theme I was given is about the Korean forced labor issue and its compensation issue, and also POW, allied POW.
問題を日本国内に限定してお話ししたいと思います。
Today I just like to focus on the domestic area in Japan.
戦争中、日本に強制動員された外国人労働者、外国人は朝鮮人、中国人、連合国の捕虜の大きく3つのカテゴリーに分かれています。
The foreigners who were forcibly labored in Japan was mainly 3 categories, and Koreans and Chinese and allied POW.
数が最も多い朝鮮人強制動員についての詳細な調査は今も進行中です。
Detailed investigation regarding Korean forced laborers are still ongoing.
しかし中国人強制動員は中国政府と日本が共同して敗戦後詳細な名簿も作っています。
Regarding Chinese forced laborers, between Japan and the Chinese government, they collaborate and had a detailed research, detailed numbers.
そして連合国の捕虜、これの中心はアメリカ人捕虜です。
Regarding allied POW, the mains are mostly Americans.
日本が捕まえたという日本が手にした白人捕虜は約12万。
Yes, so-called white POWs were about 120,000.
アメリカ人の捕虜はフィリピンにおいて捕虜になった人たちです。
Among them, Americans were captured in the Philippines.
フィリピンにおける捕虜収容所、これの ガードは台湾人です。
And the guards who were assigned to POW camps in the Philippines were Taiwanese.
はい、台湾人。朝鮮人ガードはいません。
There's no Korean guards.
そして、フィリピンにおけるアメリカ人捕虜の多くが日本に強制連行されて、このような全国の捕虜収容所に収容されました。
And those American POW mostly sent to Japan and were assigned to all over nationwide in Japan.
日
Just
本
like
全
you
国、
see
は
in
い、
in the map
は
as
い、
a camp.
これは各企業、日本スチールもそうです。炭鉱やそういうところで労働力を必要としている企業がきちっと日本政府に要求書を出して、それの認可を受けたアメリカ人捕虜が日本に強制連行されてきました。
The Japanese companies who were appealing the labor shortage and ask the government to ask for the laborers to send such as coal mine or docks, those kind of places.
日本全国に捕虜収容所が開設されて、このような形で犠牲者の数も全部細かく調査がされています。
So those POW camps were set up nationwide all over in Japan, and the number of victims were now detailed. We found out.
それで戦争中のこれら外国人労働者の犠牲に対して連合国、特にアメリカは横浜で戦争裁判の法廷を開いています。
Regarding these war criminals conducted in all camps, there was a Yokohama trial, and Yokohama trials.
はい、横浜地域でアメリカによる戦争裁判を開いたという方。はい。
So during the World War II, and those crimes were brought into the trial and held in Yokohama by the U.S., mainly U.S., mainly the U.S.
アメリカです。はい。朝鮮人の強制連行の犠牲者に対する裁判は一件もありません。
Regarding the Korean laborers, postal laborers, there has been no trial at all.
中国人の強制連行については、花岡事件と大阪の築港という港の労働、その2件があります。
For Chinese forced labor issues, there were two trials, two incidents, which one is Hanaoka in Akita Prefecture, and the another one is in Osaka.
はい、そしてそれ以外の裁判が連合国、特にアメリカの捕虜の犠牲に対する裁判でした。
And the other trials were almost about the victims of American POWs.
それでこの日本国内の捕虜収容所のガードは朝鮮人、中国人はいません。
In Japan, all those camps, there had no Korean girls.
全員が日本人、それも民間人、リタイアした軍人、傷痍軍人、こういう人たちを集めて捕虜収容所のガードにしました。
So for the girls regarding those POW camps, only Japanese civilian soldiers and wounded soldiers or veterans, those kind of people those kind of Japanese were assigned as girl to POW camps in Japan.
ですから、横浜軍事法廷では、これら捕虜収容所の監視をしていた日本人が裁かれていきます。
So speaking of the Yokohama tribunal, it's all girls were Japanese.
朝鮮人の戦犯の問題は、東南アジア、特にシンガポールやインドネシア、オランダの裁判が中心です。
For Korean war criminals trial were held in Singapore, Indonesia, and Netherlands.
こういう形で戦争裁判は日本国内では横浜法廷1カ所ですけど、その横浜法廷が中心で裁いたのはアメリカの捕虜の犠牲、虐待に対する裁判です。
War crimes trial have been held only in Yokohama, and that was mainly about regarding the victims, such as, like brutal things or less medical care, those kind of things. So the very bad treatment. So was the main issue in Yokohama trial to the American POW.
横浜軍事法廷ではの裁判の結果、巣鴨プリズンでは53人が死刑になっています。
As a result of a tribunal in Yokohama, 53 was sentenced to a death penalty.
その大多数が捕虜収容所の関係者です。
Most of them, among 53, most of them were worked as a guard to POW camps.
こういう形で連合国の捕虜虐待は戦後の戦争裁判で厳しく裁かれていきました。
So for these brutal crimes of that mistreatment of POWs to the Allied POWs were severely tried in the post-war war crimes tribunal.
こういう形で戦後の強制動員、強制連行が戦争裁判で裁かれましたけど、連合国の捕虜の怒りはそれでは収まらない。それで日本が主権を回復するときにサンフランシスコ平和条約の中にアジアに対する賠償はゼロですけど、連合国の捕虜に対しては一人一人に賠償金を支払っています。ただし額は少ないです。
So in this way, the war crimes have been tried regarding to the Allied POWs. But however, the furious mind of the Allied countries and Allied people were not satisfied. So in the San Francisco Peace Treaty, they decided, it says, there had been no compensation to the Asian country, but for the Allied countries, there were compensation to one by one.
はい、それで1990年代に連合国元捕虜は日本政府に賠償請求の訴訟を起こしました。
So back in 1990s, the ex-POWs made a lawsuit against Japanese demanding the compensation.
しかしこれはすでに解決済みという形で棄却されました。
It was abandoned or dismissed due to saying that it was already resolved.
そして、今でも続いていますけど、村山富市社民党家の首相になった時、歴史友好計画というのを始めて、連合国の元捕虜、そして敵国人として収容されたオランダ、イギリス、そういう人を日本に招待する歴史友好計画が始まりました。それは今でも続いています。
There was a project still ongoing, which was set under the Murayama Tomiichi's administration for the historical friendship project. And so ex-POWs, so-called allied POWs from like Netherlands or the UK were invited to Japan.
もう当事者はみんな亡くなりましたけど、その家族とか友達とか関係者を本当に数は少ないですけど、毎年日本に招待して交流計画をやってます。はい。
The POWs during the World War, most of them already died. However, those believed family or friends, those relatives have been invited every year to Japan and trying to keep on communicating those bereaved families. That's all.
Oh, thank you. Okay,
Can
yeah.
I add something? With the Peace Friendship Initiative in 1995, the Americans were not included. And it wasn't until Lester Tenney and a small group negotiated with the Japanese, and then there was a trip for Americans in 2010 until 2023. There were 13 trips, and some were good, some were not so good. And I want to call your attention tomorrow is National POW/MIA Day in the United States. You'll see the flag, you'll see some ceremonies, and I hope there's something where the Nippon Steel people are. And I want to repeat, the American POWs as of 2003 have been denied any compensation, and they have given up any need or desire for compensation. What they want is respect, acknowledgement, and not to be forgotten. And so, like the Germans created a fund initially for compensation, but what it is used for now is for teaching about slavery, forced labor, and democracy. That, and whether it's through poetry, through art, through scholarship, through libraries. That's the kind of thing the Japanese companies should be doing. There has been one Japanese company, Mitsubishi Mining, and only Mitsubishi Mining. It has issued an apology because it's Mitsubishi. Most people think it's the whole company. No, and it is very peculiar that the whole company or other Japanese companies did not go forward after this apology. And interestingly, it had to be brokered by an American rabbi who specializes in the Holocaust. So I hope that tomorrow that you will remember the POWs and their quest to be not forgotten. And when the Japanese say, well, we're not the same company, then you can go start to talk about Hugo Boss, the German clothing company, which is no longer owned by a German entity. It's called an Italian-British consortium. And it wasn't until they did the history of the company that they discovered it did the Hitler Youth uniforms that were made by slave labor, essentially. And so they paid into this German future fund for future education and and published their history. So here's a company that's not even German anymore, understands its civic responsibility.
Okay, thank you. Michael and Mr. Okay, then today we have a emergency online workshop about the Korean forced labor problem and then POW problem. Then maybe in Japan also many people know that Japan Steel annexed they invested the money to America, U.S. Steel, right? But under Biden government, and the Biden government prohibited that the Japan Steel's annexation to U.S. Steel, but changed the government and the Trump government. This year, June, they admitted the Japan Steel annexed the U.S. Steel. But in America, U.S. Steel's labor union, maybe this is not announced to Japan, but U.S. Steel labor union is strongly against the Japan Steel's steel. And then there's two reasons. One is a kind of structural adjustment, and then the labor cut off. And the another one is about POW compensation on the uprising problem. Then this region, even though now in America, the Japan Steel is a kind of the criminal war, the war criminal company. Yes, that image was left very strongly. But in Korea, the Japan Steel's the problem to Korean laborers is a kind of hot issue for almost 10 years. But we're thinking this is a separate problem. But in Washington this year, the co-op workshop and the campaign, we come to know that this problem is connected to each other. But that's the reason today on emergency co-workshop, we tried to understand each other this problem for the first time. This region, almost the organizers, our group, is the first time to meet each other. But I'm sure we know that it's not perfect to this kind of the trial. But we have to dialogue each other and try to understand what is the problem and what situation in their own country. This reason, today's the event is, I think, is a step of our future more solidarity and more future our project. Then, yeah, this is the last time, and if you the three presenters or another suggestion, if you would like to add your presentation, do you have any more talks you wanted to? Okay, yeah, yeah, okay.
捕虜の人なんですけど、せっかく慶泉の先生が来ているので、慶泉の卒業。シカゴのレスター・テニーさん。この人は三菱の炭鉱にで強制労働させられました。それでそれはどんなにつらかったかと彼は本も書いてます。そしてしかしそれだけではダメだというのでよく日本に時々調査にいらしてたので連絡を取り合って慶泉に招待をして授業で話していただいたことがあります。ですから慶泉の学生とレスター・テニーさんとずっと交流があったっていうでその中でお互いに学ぶことがあったので慶泉はその元 POW の方をご招待したそういう講義もやったということちょっと重要ではないけどそういう交流が慶泉の場合はありましたという形で一言。
Yes, I'd like to add one episode that there's a POW, American POW, called Lester Tenney. Have you ever heard of?
I know.
Yes. And I see.
My essay was about him.
And he also published a book.
Yeah.
Yes.
And yes, And he worked at the Mitsubishi.
Mitsui.
Mitsui.
Which is a
Okay.
UNESCO World Heritage
Yes,
Site.
that's right. And he's still he did a lot of investigation, right? So we are Professor Emerita Utsui Sensei wanted to mention that she's from Keisen University, Missouri also University. So Keisen University was invited him to give the lecture to the Keisen students. So at the time we had a very close communication, and we did a very deep and inciting lecture. So we just wanted everyone knows that there had been that kind of activity to know that. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Then, already said we have to finish the present time, and then the second part is a kind of question and answer, and I have to give the chance to the media and the journalists to join today. Already I received 3 questions from journalists, maybe it's O- from Korea or other O- in America. The first question is what do you hope to achieve through this workshop? And then second, maybe they translated each other, right? Then to Korea and to Japan, please translated each other. The second, compare to compensation cases of war crime corporation in Germany and other European countries. What messages do you think Japan's stance is sending to the international community? The third question, to realize a victim-centered approach, what roles do you think academia, the media, and the international community should play in the future? What possibilities and limitations are they demonstrating? The first question, what meaning does it have to talk about compensation for prisoners of war when Japan neither acknowledges the harm done to victims nor provides compensation to them? Then, it's a kind of complex questions, and then it may be answered by several actors. And then, first, what they hope to achieve through this workshop, what kind of thing, then let me explain me or, okay, please, this workshop, maybe I explained already, is a kind of first step, because I understand it sometimes the Korean post-labor problem, but POW is a kind of first time to me. Just I read the book, but I met the Mindy Kotler. Really, she active did this problem for a long time. But in America, I felt that it's a kind of forgotten problem. But she tried to this issue, a kind of to pursue justice, and then she tried to record this history in the United States histories, because many Americans, congressmen, American society already they think this is the finished problem or old history, but it is the processing. It's a current problem, because Nippon Steel just really they annexed the Japan U.S. Steel, but they forget this Japan Steel, what kind of company, what kind of history they have. We don't know the company's history, but even though the company have so many compensation problem, historical problem, they don't have a chance to respect their own history. They started another new investment. It doesn't change before 8 years, and after 8 years, because the colonial history was not teach to us and to American society and the Japan society. But victims is left to labors. That's the reason we have to know what kind of company and what kind of work is happening in the Japan and America. This is, we can say, as like the Israel company to the Palestine. Many Korean or Japanese or American company also they entered the Palestine and they now working in Israel. That's the reason we understand the humanities of campaign and the company's right. And also we have to connect it to the history of the company. That's one thing. And the second thing is that this is also Mindy Cutler explained that the POW problem and the Korean forced labor problem is similar, but it's a very different problem. But you know, the POW is rethinking. They are victims, but Korea guards is a kind of they are predator. But in victims' aspect, just Korean guards is so terrible, right? There is a kind of as a devil. But you know how the Korean guards was left after the war. They are a kind of victims of Japan's colonialism. But why the Korean guards have to be crime of Japan's war? Why? Because they have to be liberation, but they are sacrifice of the Second World War. Because the POW, the person didn't know about the left history. Or in Japan, America, Korea, also we didn't know that problem. That's the reason this is a co-workshop. It's not all history. We have to try to understand the background of these two problems. That's the reason I think this year, 6th anniversary of normalization between Japan and Korea, but one means of 6th anniversary. We have a lot of the historical problem we couldn't solve, or we have more many the unresolved historical problem. This is a kind of just one case. Yeah, okay. Yeah, this is our workshops, our meaning. And the second, there was third, fourth questions, right? And then we would like to receive explain from first, Mitchell, okay?
예, 두 번째 질문은 독일과의 차이인데요. 독일의 경우 기업 미래 책임 재단을 만들어서 피해자들에게 일정 정도의 정치적, 도의적 책임을 다했습니다.
So the case about the second question about Europe, how it's compared to Japan's stance, is that in Germany's case, they established a corporate foundation that actually did take the responsibility, and they did demonstrate the moral responsibilities.
그러나 독일 역시 법적인 책임은 인정하지 않았습니다.
But the law itself, they did not take the responsibility.
그 2018년에 한국 대법원 판결은 강제노동에 대해서 법적인 책임을 추정했다는 점에서 큰 의미가 있습니다.
But the 2018 ruling in Korea in the Supreme Court, it is very huge that it is asking for the legal responsibility.
이것은 그동안의 국제 인도법의 발전이 한국 상황에 반영된 것이라고 볼 수 있습니다.
And also that reflects the development of the humanitarian law.
다만 이제 일본과 독일을 비교한다면은 독일의 경우 법적인 책임은 인정하지 않았지만 그러나 가장 중요한 차이는 과거에 저질렀던 그 범죄를 부정하지 않았다는 겁니다.
But in Germany's case, they did not deny the past wrongdoings.
그런데 일본은 한편으로 인정을 하면서도 사실상 또 한편으로는 계속 그걸 부정하는 방식으로 국제사회 메시지를 던졌고 한국에도 한국 시민들에게도 그렇게 인식되었기 때문에 실제 그 과거에 대한 어떤 사죄나 반성에 대한 진정성을 받아들일 수 없는 상황입니다.
But in Japan's case, they did acknowledge, but also denied it at the same time. So that sends a message to the Koreans that they did not apologize and they did not acknowledge.
따라서 이 법적인 책임에 대해서 일본 기업이 거기에 책임을 다하는 것이 바로 그 과거의 잘못을 인정하는 하나의 증명하는 방식이라고 피해자들은 믿고 있습니다.
So one of the things that the Japan can do is that the corporations taking a full responsibility and fulfilling their legal responsibility would show a good faith.
그다음에 세 번째 질문은 두 가지 정도로 나눠볼 수가 있습니다. 첫 번째는 현재가 이미 포스트 피해자 시대다. 피해자들은 이미 다 죽고 그 이후에 기억하는 세대가 지금 우리가 지금 처해 있습니다.
So the third question, it is already post-victim era that victim themselves have already passed away. It's the generation that is remembering the past.
따라서 이제는 3세대, 2세대가 아닌 3세대가 이 주역인 이 시대에 과거의 피해를 어떻게 계속 잊지 않고 기억할 것인가, 또 그 피해자들의 고통에 대해서 간접적으로나마 공감할 것인가 하는 문제가 역사 교육이라는 차원에서 중요한 과제로 제기되고 있습니다.
So it is the third generation remembering the past damages. We have to indirectly empathize with the pain, and we also have to educate this issue.
그런 측면에서 오늘의 이 공동 워크숍은 비록 첫걸음이긴 하지만 그런 피해자 운동의 연대 또는 피해자 기억들을 확산시키는데 중요한 의미 있는 첫걸음이라고 생각됩니다.
So although this joint workshop is our first step, sending out solidarity and expanding our solidarity is very crucial.
또 하나는 반대되는 측면인데 2000년대 중반 이후에 일본의 극우 세력이라고 하는 이른바 소위 그 과거의 식민 지배나 침략 전쟁을 정당화하는 그런 세력들이 국제 무대에 굉장히 빠른 속도로 진출했습니다.
The opposite side, to talk about that, the extreme right wing of Japan, they are the ones that just justify the war and aggression. They are growing really rapidly.
그래서 국제적으로도 이른바 역사 수정주의 또는 역사 부정주의적인 입장을 가지는 논의들이 공론장이나 길거리에서 계속 확산되고 있기 때문에 그 부분에 대해서도 어떤 피해자의 관점, 인권의 관점에서 적극적으로 공동으로 대응해야 되는 그런 상황이라 할 수 있습니다.
And we do have to publicly retaliate on this issue and respond with the growing international public opinion, especially on the historical revisionism.
그런 측면에서 이 공동 워크숍이 그런 대응을 위한 하나의 시작이라고 볼 수 있겠습니다.
So in that sense, this is a start of the responses as we begin this joint workshop.
Okay, thank you. And before we chance to the 서지정 and 우지마이코, how about the Mindy Kotler, you think about the number post questions? That means about the compensation for the prisoner words. But maybe you don't want the word the compensation, or you miss a kind of another word.
Compensation
Right.
is not on the table for a whole host of reasons. To this point, generations, it's not compensation. They want their grandfather remembered. They want this part of American history. When they want that Japan actually show that it shares our values. How many times I've heard that? Well, you don't share our values unless you remember, unless you stop spending money on lawyers to fight acknowledgement, and the money you've spent on lawyers you could have done for education and reconciliation. It seems that the Japanese companies are still sort of ancient and backwards and not modern. It's not just they don't employ women and they have very rigid rules, but they're not quite of this world, a modern world. And to be frank, regarding the Germans didn't really want to do anything either until President Clinton got on the phone and he talked to the head of Germany, Schroeder, and said, you're going to do something and you're going to do something now. And he put Stu Eisenstadt as a special envoy on a plane, and Stu Eisenstadt knocked out the Berlin Accords in 2000 and got this fund going and got some contrition out of the Germans. I'm not sure if they're in this, I haven't checked, but since then, and at least through the Biden administration, there's been a special envoy on Holocaust issues, a diplomat who's called ambassador, who goes to monitor and to keep the Germans' feet to the fire in regarding reconciliation and responsibility and civic duty. I would almost say there's a racism that we do not keep Japan. We maybe see are they too weak to handle responsibilities? Are they too, do we need to keep protecting them from being, I keep using the word responsible, but a good civic citizen? We didn't do that with the Germans, and we still don't do that with the Germans. It's an interesting question.
Okay, then I'll move to Seo-Jae-young's answers. Or Seo-Jae, if you have something to explain about the 4 questions. Yes, any questions, okay?
Well, Kim Min-chul explained, answered some of the questions, but I'd like to add a little bit to his answer to question number 2. And so it's a common misunderstanding that Germany and other European countries paid compensation for the victims. These states paid the compensation for victims of World War II, but they did not pay compensation or reparations to victims of their colonial rules in Africa and other places. And I think that should be made clear that the European countries themselves have not fully recognized that there are colonial rules and responsibilities, much less did they pay reparations to the victims of their colonial rule and violence. And some of the European countries are now slowly beginning to recognize their responsibilities. And yet the ways they paid reparations are very problematic because, for example, a European country paid reparations to Namibia for Germany did so.
Only last year apologized.
Yeah, but then Germany gave the money as an economic cooperation, and they did not recognize that it was paying reparations for the colonial damages and violence. Furthermore, Germany gave money to the Namibian government, not to the victims of the Hereras. So the Hereras, an ethnic group, a minority in Namibia, were the main victims of German rule and violence. And yet, Germany did not pay the reparations to the victims, but to the government, which did not actually support the victims themselves. And so Europeans are not doing their, dispensing with their responsibilities in a responsible way. And Japan can actually be a leader and model for the European countries and In this case of U.S. Steel and Nippon Steel, I think Japan, Korea, U.S. have a unique opportunity that they can play a leading role of coming to terms with their past responsibilities and become a leader and model for all the others.
Another question is okay? Is just yes, second, right? Okay. Then, 内海先生はどうですか、こう、POW 問題と朝鮮人戦犯問題を、朝鮮強制連行問題ですね、こう一緒にちょっと考えることに関して、どういう意味があるのか、もしかして、この質問の中で答えることがあれば、お願いしたいと思います。こういう一緒にやったこと初めてだと思います。we move to the Uchimi-aiko's answer. So what does mean our kind of the co-workshops, the Korea post-labor problem, and then the POW problem is meeting together. Yeah.
強制労働の問題について言うと、今ここでは出てこみませんでしたけど、中国人の強制連行の問題、これについては花岡和解っていうのがあって、花岡鉱山に強制動員された中国人が抗日反乱を起こした1945年の6月30日です。
Yes, in case of Chinese forced labor issue, there was a Hanaoka case which was reached an agreement. The POW were, forced laborers were brought to coal mines in Hanaoka, and the agreement was made in 1945? No, maybe no. It was 45? Is that right? So that's for the Chinese forced labor case.
そしてその時の中心メンバーが高順さんという国民党の元軍人でした。
And the main organizer was the Chinese person who named Kuomintang and one of the KMT members.
そして花岡の被害者が鹿島建設に謝罪と補償を求めました。
Those victims requested Kajima Corporation for their compensation and also apology.
私たちは高順さんと一緒に鹿島と交渉をして、鹿島建設は謝罪の声明を一緒に出しました。
So we worked together with the Chinese leader Ko Jun-san and to negotiate with Kajima Corporation, and we finally got the compensation.
今でも毎年6月30日、7月1日は花岡の日として歴史を語り継ぐこういう活動が地元で続いています。
And so since then, we've been continuing the event to memorize these days. And every June 30th and July 1st, they are continuing to have an event to commemorate this.
それだけではなく、西松建設も謝罪と補償で次の世代への教育という形に中国と協力して進めています。
And not only Hanaoka case, but Nishimatsu construction case, and they did apologize and promised to do kind of education, and still they're doing, continuing the activities.
朝鮮人の強制労働についてはもうすでにお話があったので、もう一つ加えると、連合国の捕虜、この人たちの犠牲は、先ほど地図に出しましたけど、 各地に今慰霊碑を作って地元の人たちと元捕虜の人たちが共同でそうですね慰霊の催しと次の世代に教育をしていくそういう活動を各地で少しずつ進んでいます。
Regarding the Allied POWs victims in nationwide, I mean the local people and together with local people, they had several, no, not several, I'm not sure quite the number, but commemorating statue, no, commemorating things set up and memorial, yeah, memorial site, some statues.
Done privately, the government had very little to do, had nothing to do with.
はい。
So
Government
that's
nothing
right.
to do です。
Yeah, that's
そ
right.
れを私たちも怒ってます。
We're also angry about the Japanese attitude.
It's incomprehensible.
ですから個別の企業でやっているところはあるけども、日本政府として植民地支配の責任、そこをきちっと取っていないということは、ご指摘の通りです。
So some companies are doing their own activities. However, we are very aware that the Japanese government is still not conducting their full responsibilities. We are very aware and we are also angry about it. Thank you.
So add something.
Okay.
The interesting thing about the UNESCO Industrial World Heritage Sites is that it wants to celebrate Japan as a unique Asian nation that it modernized before other Asian nations. However, its attitude towards labor, towards the use of prisoner of war labor, the use of slave labor, kidnapped labor, shows, and its unwillingness to acknowledge this shows that it is still not a Meiji Industrial Revolution, but pre-Meiji, where prisoners were akin to chattel, were slaves, and where it shows an attitude that is pre-industrialization. So no matter how they want to whitewash it with the UNESCO World Heritage Sites, they've made them uninteresting, and they've taken the humanity out of these sites by the way they have been organized, and it was all because of the sister-in-law and sister of Minister Kato, who is the finance minister, if I recall correctly, and he wants to, well, he just put his supporting Koizumi right now. So the UNESCO thing is an illusion, a distraction.
Right. Okay, thank you. It's a good question and the good answers with all of the shares there. As Mindy Cutler indicated that the UNESCO, the Heritage Museum in Japan is a kind of fabricated, right? It's that they didn't write anything, right? Yeah, it's got just the UNESCO ordered that the Japan government write the history of the forced labor, right? But even though Kato is a kind of a friend of Abe, then yeah, but they just hide the real fact of the UNESCO heritage, right? Okay, I have to finish this section first time, and then I send the file that is Japan's and Korea's the civilian group support the forced labor problem, and they announced the core declarations. Nippon Steel must take immediate action to restore the human rights, dignity, and justice of forced labor victims. And then there's the four, Japan 2 civilian groups, and then Korean 2 groups. They announced the core declaration for this core workshop. And the workshop, the host organization also support this announcement. And please use the announcement for the media brief and the media announce. And then today, yes, we are kind of during the program. Then maybe already so many people support the project. We are now in America because we have the co-workshop in America and the campaign. Then first, already we finished the workshop in Pennsylvania University in September 15. And the theme is a kind of the historical program. And then yesterday, we did a workshop in George Washington University about the Korean War, why Korean War continued even now, or why the Korean War doesn't finish it yet. And it's a very excellent workshop in two areas. And already, maybe we will announce the summary version to everybody. And today and tomorrow, we are doing a campaign to America State Department and the American Congressman and then American peace groups and the civilian groups. So we met together and we would like to share our workshop and our campaign in America to Japan and the Koreans. And then it is tonight. Tonight is a kind of emergency co-workshop, just online, because we would like to introduce Mindy Cutler's the action is excellent and wonderful to Korean and the Japan civilian and even the Americans. We supporting this program. As Utami Aiko, and she take part in this project for 1 week. We have the respect and honor to her. And Sejong he's so busy now. He have a class in Japan, but he came to America and he support our project together. And Kim Min-chul also, he came from Korea, and then he is a kind of instrument person to this project. And also the echo is translated is was excellent, right? And please give hands to her. And then tonight is a very, very short action, but I think it's very, very meaningful and very important action. Okay, let me finish this section, and please everybody support these two action. And then our MPA also try to make more challenging the program to Japan and Korea and to America. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice good night. Okay.